Hey, can't you hear me, you red-headed idiot?
Jackson ignored him again. Watching this, Enkrid was newly grateful that he had brought Jackson along. What if it had been Rem?
Is he calling me now?
It would be lucky if a word came out before an axe did. Jackson just ignored him. How fortunate is that? Though the one being ignored must be quite upset.
You bastard, I'm Pollard Rockfried.
So what? Jackson communicated with his eyes. Fortunately, before things escalated, Leona came down. Leona came down with her nursemaid, smiling brightly.
You're late!
Late? That guy you brought as a guard, what the heck is he doing? You sent him, didn't you?
Huh. Leona walked over lightly and stopped Pollard's rant with a question. Pollard tilted his head, wondering what she meant. Leona's hand sliced through the air. Slap!
Wow.
Enkrid admired inwardly. Leona had slapped the guy across the face without any warning. It was a swift swing and a resounding smack. The guy couldn't speak for a while, so stunned by the slap. Pollard, his head turned, looked at Leona with wide eyes.
You said it! You crazy bastard!
Leona's clear and sweet voice echoed. Enkrid thought he should revise the answer he had given to Kreis. That woman was harsh to others. Many drew their swords and weapons. With one slap, the atmosphere turned deadly. Enkrid didn't draw his weapon but stood behind Leona. Jackson stood beside him, and the ferry company commander silently stayed in her place.
You crazy bitch, are you trying to get yourself killed?
Finally, Pollard grabbed his slapped cheek and spoke.
You'll be the one to die. Do you know where you are, throwing money and using forces carelessly? Did you think that wouldn't be noticed?
Enkrid watched, wondering what was going on. He thought things were getting interesting. The Border Guards Inn also served as a meeting place for the trading company. They didn't build officers' quarters within the unit. Thanks to that, the inn business flourished. That's why these people gathered here. The innkeeper's eyes widened as he watched from the hall. Suddenly there was slapping and people drawing weapons against each other. Having experienced various things, even he looked bewildered. The owner rolled his eyes a few times, then decided and turned towards the kitchen. He gave up. He was a wise man. There was no way to stop it or intervene anyway. The fortunate thing was that all damages caused here would be compensated in the name of the Rockfried Trading Company. That's why he remained so relaxed. As he went into the kitchen, he subtly signaled to Enkrid.
Nothing major will happen, right? It'll be okay, right?
Enkrid had a casual acquaintance with the innkeeper, Alan. Enkrid nodded slightly, making sure others couldn't see. Leona was not stupid, therefore she wouldn't create a situation where swords would be drawn. So even though the atmosphere was tense, this was all the commotion there would be.
That's why you're so stupid. Your predecessor didn't entrust the company to you.
Leona began to speak. She seemed indifferent to the other's defiance or force. It was as if her entire demeanor screamed that no matter what happened, they wouldn't dare touch her. Enkrid felt a strange sensation. It was purely because of Leona's displayed attitude.
Bold.
What should this be called? It's the skill of cutting off the opponent's chance to resist or say anything.
Tell me where you are, right now.
Gritting his teeth and yelling, Pollard inadvertently opened his mouth, cowed.
A border guard. That's right, you idiot. This is the border guard. Do you hire thugs or guilds that swindle back-alley drifters here? Even knowing I have the escort of the border guard's standing army, I didn't do that, I didn't know about the border guard escort until later.
He was overwhelmed. Pollard's hands shook and he muttered nonsense. Swish! Clack! In response to Paul's babbling, the man behind him drew his sword a little, then put it back. The sound snapped Pollard back to his senses, and he changed his tune.
It wasn't me. Where did this false accusation come from?
The picture was becoming clear.
He probably prepared to deny everything before coming here.
Yet, caught up in the atmosphere, he almost spilled everything. Leona clicked her tongue, then she pulled out a chair and sat down. Crossing her legs in leather pants, she took out a cigarette from her bosom.
Light.
The nursemaid held up a candle to light it.
Sit down. Aren't we going to discuss the succession rights?
These were the words of the woman who had caused a standoff with weapons drawn. Smoke from her cigarette wafted up from her lips. Pollard roughly pulled out a chair and sat down. Who would be at a disadvantage if a fight broke out here? Did he think the two squads outside were deployed from nowhere? Soon the two began their conversation. It was a time for them to clash with what they had prepared for the succession. In other words, it was a series of words that Enkrid couldn't understand.
You want to inherit the trading company without even being able to interpret the trade routes? Have you memorized all the company codes? Have you?
That can be done by a steward. Besides, I am the legitimate heir. How can a woman who has been roaming outside?
The fact that I am qualified to inherit the company was acknowledged by the predecessor. Are you going to defy that? Claiming inheritance just because of legitimate blood? The predecessor announced my qualification publicly, yet you can't accept that, and without any ability, you want to take over the company just because of your bloodline? Others will easily accept that, won't they?
Enkrid mostly let it pass over him. From the way they talked to the way they led the conversation, it all seemed like Leona was winning.
So he tried assassination as a last resort.
Coincidentally, there was a group in the border guard that took such requests. Should this be considered cunning or just foolish? They continued arguing for quite some time. To Enkrid, it seemed like Leona was there just to mock her opponent.
Are you really the predecessor's son? You don't look like him at all. Makes me suspicious.
You, what? What did you say? Are you implying my mother, that she took another man's seed?
Polyd, fuming with anger, stuttered. He slammed the table in his rage.
Phew, that's how it turns out. That wasn't my intention.
Leona, blowing out smoke, had control of the situation. But was this woman always like this? Wasn't she supposed to be demure and quiet? I don't know. After all, he had only seen her for 2 days and exchanged no more than 50 words. Everyone has a dual nature and isn't simple.
You damn woman.
Watch your mouth, you ugly bastard.
You bitch.
The guy who had held back when his mother was insulted couldn't bear being called ugly and placed his hand on the short sword at his waist. Seeing this, Enkrid subtly gripped his sword. This was a place where the border guard's escort maintained order. They couldn't just stand by and watch a sword fight break out. One of the reasons the value of the city of the border guard was high was because here, whether it was merchants or nobles, disputes could be settled with words rather than swords. Of course, there were still swords and assassinations behind the scenes, but to draw a sword and fight face to face. That's a death wish. Jackson was on my right, and the company commander stood a step behind, as if watching. Enkrid placed his hand on the grip, keeping Polyd's guard within his sword's range.
Step to the left on the first move.
Draw the sword and strike from above to cut down on the head. There wasn't time to take a proper stance, so it had to be done simultaneously with the draw. Polyd's swordsman within range also reacted. He extended his arm longer. What kind of swordsmanship would he use? For a moment, Enkrid wished the opponent would attack. Rationally, he knew it would never happen, but he still hoped.
What kind of swordsmanship is it?
How fast is he? Faster than Rem's axe? Faster than the half-blood fairy's whistling dagger? He wanted to experience it, to confront it, to challenge it. It was pure competitiveness. He wanted to measure his skill. The sudden surge of heat warmed his body. If he attacked, he would cut him down. A peculiar tension formed between the two. In the midst of this, Polyd started sweating profusely. Should he draw his sword here? Wouldn't it seem cowardly if he didn't? A myriad of thoughts ran through his mind. Leona despised such indecision. He should either draw his sword or use his words. If he couldn't do either, he shouldn't have started this. Indeed, if it weren't for the predecessor's will, she wouldn't have bothered with him. The strange standoff continued, and the inn grew silent. At that moment, the sound of the inn-door opening was heard. The heavy wooden door swung open and hit the wall. Thanks to the person who had forcefully pushed the door open, Enkrid's view widened. The opponent also relaxed. The two took half a step back by unspoken agreement.
Damn it.
It wasn't Rem, but I almost drew my sword in a fight-crazed state without thinking of the situation. Enkrid sighed inwardly and turned his head. A familiar face came into view. It was Torres from the border guard. 5 more people in similar attire followed behind him. They wore brown leather armor with a grid pattern over their tunics with dark brown coats on top, adorned with eagle emblems on the shoulders.
We are the Royal Guard Border Patrol. We are here to arrest the instigator who hired the Aspen spy unit to cause this commotion.
Polyd let out a stupid groan. His guard stepped beside him and gripped his shoulder. Enkrid was curious about their relationship. It didn't seem to be just an employer-employee relationship.
You involved Aspen's dogs in a succession fight?
At Torres' words, Polyd's face turned pale. Leona, however, remained calm.
Who called the border guard?
Enkrid thought as he watched the situation unfold.
We will arrest everyone.
It wasn't Polyd or Leona who reacted to Torres' words.
Are you saying you'll detain people without evidence? This person is about to inherit the Rockfried Trading Company. Surely you aren't taking bribes from the other side, are you?
It was the man behind Polyd. A man with brown hair and a plain appearance stepped forward. He was implying bribery. At his words, Torres frowned but then smirked and replied.
There's a funny bastard here.
He openly expressed his displeasure, but what he said was also true. Why did the border guard intervene in a major trading company's meeting and succession discussion? Because the standing army of the border guard always remained neutral. It was a given that if trouble arose within the border guard, the standing army would intervene. However, they promised to remain neutral in any situation. If they arrested someone without evidence, it would be easy to misunderstand their actions, implying they couldn't make an arrest without evidence.
Was it planned?
The opponent also used his brain. Torres knew this, which is why he couldn't just cut down the funny bastard right away. A short silence, tension filled the air. The one to break the silence was Leona.
Bribery? Of course not.
First, she denied the funny bastard's words.
Of course, someone from the trading company could have brought in Aspen's spies.
She continued.
Huh?
Polyd was startled again by Leona's words, his mouth agape. Then he closed it, conscious of the surrounding gazes. Seeing this, even Enkrid almost sighed. This was practically an admission.
We don't know yet, that's why I called the border guard.
Who called? Even Enkrid was surprised by this, Leona continued.
I request detainment until this matter is resolved. Detain both heirs and find the evidence.
Leona looked around the room. Her ability to shift the flow with a few words was impressive.
I heard there's an instigator on the run. Let's capture him and get his confession.
A trap, a checkmate. If this were chess, it would be checkmate with no escape. Would the captured man endure under torture? They said the captured ones were taken to the unit, but no one knew who the instigator was. They all said the leader knew everything. That leader must be the one who escaped.
Very well, Lady Leona. But what if he never shows up?
The plain-looking, brown-haired man turned to Leona and asked.
Then it wouldn't be the border guard's concern, would it?
Leona answered.
From here on, it's a matter for the trading company to discuss amongst themselves. It would be proper to return to the city and ask the main figures of the company about the qualifications for succession.
The brown-haired man finished with a smile, hitting the nail on the head.
Once they leave the city.
Could Leona handle Polyd's guard force? It didn't seem likely.
I am a merchant. I don't ask for things without compensation. To the first person who finds and brings that man, I will give this.
Leona said as she placed a dagger on the table. A long, slender blade, covered by a black leather sheath. It was a stiletto dagger.
The Carmen collection?
Someone recognized it. Enkrid saw Jackson take a step forward from beside him. A usually indifferent friend moved by a single dagger. It was indeed a weapon of significant value.
Surprising.
Carmen was a famous assassin who was known for his weapon craftsmanship more than his assassination skills. The weapons he made were called the Carmen Collection. The dagger she just placed on the table was one of them. A master craftsman's dagger that could stab and withdraw without leaving a drop of blood.
Hey, why are you offering that without consulting me?
This is my property, given by the predecessor.
Polyd protested, but Leona ignored him and confirmed.
I offer this. Bring him in.
This effectively placed a bounty on the man's head, and Enkrid thought things were taking an interesting turn.
She already ordered him to be brought in.
Even while thinking this, Enkrid was newly impressed by Leona's shrewdness.
Call the border guard to buy time. Offer a bounty to achieve your goal.
She created a situation that benefited everyone, except for Polyd, of course. Regardless, if they caught him, they would earn hundreds of thousands of krona. It was enough to make everyone's eyes light up.
I will catch him.
And surprisingly, there was someone here willing to take the lead.
I'll handle it personally.
It was Jackson. He didn't just say it, he seemed confident. Enkrid nodded at Jackson. It was the first time Jackson had taken such an active stance.
He must really want it.
That thought crossed his mind. It wasn't a difficult task. Who controlled the night and back alleys of this city? Border Guard. The Gilpin Guild. The owner of that guild, Kreis, was currently a member of Enkrid's squad. Moreover, they had already been instructed to keep an eye out and hold on to anyone suspicious. In other words, the target was already halfway in their hands.
All right then. We'll stay here for 2 days. And if the issue isn't resolved by then, I'll decide to escort both of you to the unit. Once evidence or witnesses are collected after the escort, we'll deal with the matter then.
Torres summarized the situation. Pollard tried to stand up, saying he couldn't agree, but the funny bastard on Pollard's side held his shoulder and whispered something in his ear to restrain him. Leona remained indifferent.
All right.
She nodded her head calmly as if it was what she wanted. Enkrid, watching the situation unfold, nudged Jackson's side. Sensitive Jackson blocked Enkrid's finger with his palm.
What is it? Did you have a hobby of collecting knives?
He didn't know. Up until now, he had never seen such a side of him. Even in their quarters, all of Jackson's belongings were just standard issue supplies. He never dealt with personal items.
It's Carmen's stiletto.
Jackson answered, as if that was explanation enough. Enkrid didn't really understand. He had only vaguely heard that the Carmen collection was famous and expensive. Jackson spoke again, noticing Enkrid's confusion.
Even if you had dozens of gold coins, you couldn't get it. Do you know who Carmen is? He doesn't get called a master craftsman for nothing. If that knife appeared on the black market, it would cause deadly fights. In fact, a few years ago there was an uproar when the third piece of the Carmen collection, a Qatar, appeared among the assassin guilds.
Enkrid didn't know, but in reality, many who lived by assassination died over it. Of course, those living in the light wouldn't know this. Only the story remained that the Thieves' Guild of Gior retrieved the knife.
The stiletto is Carmen's fourth work.
The first was a pocket knife. Since it was the knife used for his first kill, it was named First Murder. It was said to be already broken and lost. The second was a thin, long cane sword, the stick sword. The third was the Qatar, and the fourth was the stiletto. The fifth was a hunting knife with a single edge, and the sixth was a sword breaker. The seventh was the invisible blade, a knife whose blade couldn't be seen in broad daylight. 7 daggers and 7 stories. That's why Carmen's name has endured until now. He made exactly 7 weapons for 7 targets, all for the sake of revenge. With First Murder, he killed the slave trader who owned him. With the second, the stick sword, he stabbed and killed the soldier who dishonored his sister. With the third, the Qatar, he killed the squire, serving the noble who led that soldier. With the fourth, the stiletto, he stabbed the heart of the noble who employed the squire. With the fifth, the hunting knife, he slit the throats of each of the noble's guards. With the sixth, the sword breaker, he broke the beloved sword of that noble, completing his revenge. It was said that the seventh, the invisible blade, never fulfilled its purpose. Some say the final target of his revenge was himself, and that he drove it into his own heart. The truth remains forever unknown. It's a story from decades ago.
Do you carry all those stories in your head?
Jackson relayed all the stories in a calm tone in one breath. Enkrid couldn't interrupt him. Jackson's tone was calm, but throughout, a strained fervor shone in his eyes. A passion akin to madness. Unable to stop him, Enkrid listened to the end and then casually remarked if he memorized all of that. Jackson answered nonchalantly.
I just know it. It's not memorized.
Only then did Jackson return to his usual self.
We'll have to stay here for 2 more days.
Though he wanted to leave immediately, the escort mission held him back. He had to fulfill his duty. However, to Enkrid, Jackson's current demeanor seemed like he was changing the subject.
No way.
Enkrid looked at Jackson with a peculiar thought.
Is he embarrassed?
His face wasn't red, and there were no signs of discomfort, but it was clear he was changing the subject.
I'd like to go catch them myself, but I can't abandon the escort mission.
It seemed like he wanted to change the topic quickly.
If you get the Carmen collection, are you going to sell it?
Enkrid poked him, curious.
Why would I sell it?
Jackson retorted, eyes wider than usual. He really seems to like it. It wasn't because of Krona he purely wanted that stiletto. Such a unique taste. Sure, to someone, it could be a remarkable item. Especially if Kreis saw it, he'd be drooling. Selling it would make his pockets heavy. But if it was purely for its collection value, wasn't that taste a bit too unique?
It's a dagger used by an assassin to kill people.
regardless of its fame, wanting to keep that thing. What was he thinking? It wasn't even some idle rich person's bad taste. Enkrid didn't argue or ask further. He just maintained his usual demeanor. He didn't delve too much into his squad members' personal lives. That was how he managed to maintain his position as a squad leader until now. Enkrid left Jackson and turned his attention elsewhere. Towards Polid, he saw a plain-looking man, the funny bastard, and a swordsman with his arms hanging loose, talking. The two whispered, and among them the man with the rapier caught Enkrid's eye. The man's gaze brushed past Enkrid. Enkrid stared at him too. He still felt like he wanted to face him in a fight someday.
Things have gotten complicated. It seems we made a poor choice. It was an inevitable choice. Was it?
The man with the plain face started speaking, and the swordsman responded. His tone was boring. It was because he wasn't particularly interested. His eyes scanned the fairy and the other party members.
Interesting people.
Especially the fairy woman intrigued him. Their nadir is known for their speed with the sword. He felt a desire to challenge them. Before that, the ones around her also seemed quite capable. He wondered what it would have been like if they were under his command.
They would have been worth training.
Both of them weren't bad. Especially the one with auburn hair, even his gait was impressive. Quiet and always ready to draw his sword at any moment.
What do we do now? What have we done when things got complicated before?
The man laughed sheepishly at the swordsman's question. It wasn't an unpleasant smile.
We solved it with brute force. Then do that.
The swordsman looked at the soldier he had briefly locked eyes with, a soldier with a delicate face. He didn't seem young. It felt like seeing a boy who had just grabbed a sword and was excited, showing his eagerness so openly. It would be a lie to say he wasn't drawn to him. It's the fate of swordsmen to want to face those who show such spirit.
Please, take care of it.
The brown-haired man slightly bowed his head and then went over to Polid, trying to calm him down.
Don't get excited. There's nothing to worry about. After all, without evidence, it's over. And when we get back to the city, who do you think the merchants will side with?
But what if they catch them?
It'll still be fine.
The brown-haired man smiled with his eyes. Polid was still anxious, but he forced a smile, knowing he had no other choice.
Trust me.
At his words, Polid forced himself to muster some courage and added,
Once we get back, it's over. My father's people will support me, and that whore will just die. Maybe I'll take her as a concubine if I feel like it.
Will it really be like that? The brown-haired man thought Polid was an idiot, but didn't show it on his face. Leona silently watched the two. Their conversation wasn't audible. The brown-haired man trusted the swordsman's talk of brute force. The swordsman was wondering if he could fight the fairy after knocking down the soldier who showed eagerness towards him. Jackson overheard their conversation, but wasn't interested. It seemed like a play to reassure the idiot Polid. He just wanted Carmen's stiletto.
Christ.
He hoped Kreis had properly manipulated the guild members by now. He had faith. Although Kreis was terrible at physical tasks, his skills were remarkable. After all, they had been in the same squad, and Jackson had seen his abilities. It wasn't something to worry about.
If it goes south.
He could obtain the dagger through other means. As Enkrid respected Jackson's hobby and stepped back, Torres, who had summarized the situation, approached.
How have you been?
There's nothing to complain about.
That's true. Looks like we'll be killing time at the inn for 2 days?
Torres was right, but was it necessary to spend time idly? Enkrid believed Kreis would fulfill his role. The underworld had its own rules, and you should leave things to the experts. Who was Kreis? He was the one who had willingly stepped into the troublemaker squad. Why? There were many reasons, but the main one was clear. In the troublemaker squad, he didn't have to fight himself. The atmosphere was different from other squads. He knew how to find his place. When he decided to take over the guild, he must have had his reasons. Enkrid trusted that. Sure enough, by that evening, someone sent by Kreis arrived.
Is there someone named Enkrid here?
It was a boy who looked to be about 13 or 14. His voice had just started to deepen. Looking scared, he rolled his eyes nervously and asked, glancing from side to side. The soldier guarding the inn gestured inside. Enkrid, who was in the hall using chairs and tables to train his body with the isolation technique, heard this and stepped forward. Since he had taken off his shirt, he draped a large cloth over his body. As he stepped outside, the cold wind quickly cooled the sweat on his forehead. It was very cold.
That's me.
The boy, wearing a coat made of thin cloth, looked at Enkrid and spoke.
I have a message.
The boy's tone was firm. Enkrid pulled a few coins from his pocket. Seeing the boy shiver with fear and looking around nervously, he thought the boy could use a few coins. He liked the boy's determined tone as well, but the boy refused the coins.
No, sir, I get paid by the guild.
The boy handed over a small note. It was quite impressive. It seemed like Kreis had complete control over the guild. A young boy refusing money was notable.
Who is he?
One of the soldiers surrounding the inn approached and asked. Enkrid candidly replied that the boy was sent by Kreis.
What's he up to now?
Kreis was a resourceful man who dealt with various tasks, handled information, sold tobacco, and brought in prostitutes. Hiring a boy to run errands was a common thing. Enkrid went back inside and unfolded the note. Before the morning of the second day, it was a short message but clear enough. It meant they would catch them soon.
Can I ask what you're doing all day?
As Enkrid threw the note into the fireplace, Torres asked from behind.
Training.
While on escort duty?
I don't think anyone will attack right now.
Won't the client say anything about it?
As you can see.
It looks good to me.
Leona was also watching. Enkrid didn't care who was watching. Hadn't Auden said it?
The isolation technique adds a day to each day. Think of it as meticulously building the fortress of your body on today's foundation.
He thought it was a fancy way of saying not to skip a single day. He resolved to keep that advice as best as he could. Enkrid was the kind of person who did what he set his mind to. He incorporated the isolation technique into his daily sword training.
Aren't you bored?
Not at all. It was only fun, the fun of seeing himself change day by day. While training, he maintained his sense of the blade. He also used the focus point technique. The heart of the beast was the only technique he couldn't easily use during training. So, he continued performing the technique with his shirt off.
Is it because she's the merchant's daughter? She doesn't seem to be shy.
Torres said with a chuckle, sitting on a chair he had turned backward. Leona responded with a light smile instead of a verbal answer. She was observing Enkrid, that face and that body, even the sweat running down as he trained. It fit her taste perfectly. Enkrid continued to move, ignoring everyone's gazes. Watching this, the ferry company commander sat on the inn stairs and asked Jackson.
Does the squad leader usually enjoy being watched?
I don't know.
Jackson was curt, and the commander didn't ask further or press the issue. She was also closely observing Enkrid now. A handsome face and a well-trained body are always welcome, aren't they? Enkrid pressed his palms on the chair, stretched his legs forward, and put weight on his arms. Every time his body lowered and then came back up, the outer muscles of his forearms twitched. 2 more members of the Frontier Guard joined Torres, who was watching.
Is that the guy, the one who mocked us as the Spellbreaker? Yeah, that's him.
The 2 guards spoke loudly, as if they wanted to be heard. Enkrid, having just completed a round of his technique, made a suggestion to Torres.
If you're bored, how about a sparring match?
After all, they had time to kill. There was a large open space behind the inn. It was a facility for those who frequented the inn, a place for mercenaries and swordsmen hired for caravan escorts. Occasionally, when disputes arose, this was where fights would happen. So it was a suitable place for a sparring match.
The lady is quite generous.
As Torres spoke and looked at Leona again, she nodded without hesitation.
It will be a good show.
Torres had asked for her approval, and Leona granted it immediately. Torres was also itching for some action. Moreover, the 2 Frontier Guards behind him were even more enthusiastic.
He's supposed to be a top-notch soldier. Isn't it proper to start from the bottom and work your way up, Captain Torres?
Everyone seemed very interested in Enkrid. Enkrid was pleased to have multiple opponents.
Let's have everyone join in.
From that moment, an unexpected sparring frenzy began. They broke appropriate branches to use as substitute swords to avoid any real injuries, but everyone was serious.
Count me in.
Even the company commander joined, and everyone in the inn became spectators.
This is crazy.
Only Leona's guards shook their heads in disbelief. They thought everyone was mad. What kind of sparring was this during an escort mission? Of course, they couldn't stop it. Leona, their employer, had given her permission. Torres still demonstrated exceptional skill. When sparring with him, Enkrid lost 7 out of 10 times.
You've improved.
Torres remarked, standing still while catching his breath. A sudden question arose. What would happen if they fought with real swords? Enkrid didn't know. He wasn't the type to be certain about fights. No matter how skilled one was with a sword, a person would die if their heart was pierced by a dagger held by a 7-year-old. Regardless of skill, the outcome of a life-and-death battle was uncertain.
Is that so?
Enkrid replied while lying on the ground, then sprang to his feet.
Next is me. Come in.
Despite it being a season where one's breath could be seen, the vacant lot behind the inn was filled with sweat and heat. Enkrid didn't know how it had come to this, but he ended up fighting only with Torres. It was a series of sparring matches. For Enkrid, it was valuable time. Torres and the border guard were adept at unorthodox attacks, but that didn't mean their basic skills were lacking. A guard, holding a broken twig in both hands, spoke.
I specialize in daggers. Be careful not to get hurt.
2 twigs, each about half the length of a forearm.
We both need to be careful. That's right. Let's both be careful.
The guard chuckled. Within his laughter was a visible enthusiasm, devoid of malice but full of pure competitiveness. The twigs clashed, and Enkrid fought again. After exchanging a few moves, Enkrid expected the opponent to close the distance. Instead, the opponent crossed the short twigs he held in place of daggers to catch Enkrid's sword, twisting and deflecting it. He then threw one of the twigs at Enkrid's torso, disrupting his balance.
In a real fight that would have hit your eye.
He spoke. This man was exceptional, nearly on par with Torres. Enkrid understood why the border guard received special treatment. Enkrid nodded silently. Another defeat. It was time for a short break. Naturally, everyone rested. Jackson leaned against the door connecting the vacant lot to the inn. As Enkrid entered, Jackson spoke.
If the opponent has a dagger, you shouldn't just focus on closing the distance. Will you only fight with basic skills just because your fundamentals are strong? If the opponent is crawling on the ground, is striking with your sword the only answer? Why not kick him?
Whether he won or lost, Jackson always offered guidance. It might seem like nagging to some, but not to Enkrid. He listened attentively.
I didn't expect him to use such a technique with a dagger. His usual weapon is probably a sword breaker.
A sword breaker, a sword with a saw-like back edge meant for breaking the opponent's weapon. In other words, this man specialized in breaking his opponent's weapons.
You did well not to give up distance, but you should have also considered what to do next.
Jackson meticulously reviewed the events of the sparring session. Enkrid always gave his best. If he had given up distance, he would have simply been overpowered. That's why he didn't. Thanks to that, he saw how a sword breaker technique was used. What he did well, Jackson acknowledged.
Think about how to counter such techniques.
Mastering the basics of swordsmanship, training the body, learning techniques, and ingraining them into muscle memory. All of that was important, but dealing with what happened during a sparring match required his own contemplation. That was Jackson's advice. Enkrid agreed. Repeating the same action hundreds of times was the only way to truly master it. To make anything his own, he had to ponder it deeply. Reflection and contemplation, those were Enkrid's true weapons, and so he did.
After the break, it's my turn.
Another guard, adept with both sword and kicks, stepped forward. He didn't just step, but always mixed in kicks. He was tricky to deal with, but Enkrid learned a lot from him. All 6 border guards, including Torres, sparred with him in turn. Each had similar techniques but also showcased unique skills. They had individual styles, but their basics were exceptional. There was much to learn. In the past, such sparring wouldn't have been much help. It was inevitable. One cannot appreciate the view from the summit without climbing the mountain. But now, it is different.
More on focus point.
The technique learned from Ragna was proving its worth. The heart of the beast provided it a foundation of boldness.
Keep your senses sharp at all times.
Jackson said.
Keep your senses sharp.
Enkrid nodded. Leona approached him as he was sweating.
You must really like it.
She said.
Like what?
Sword fighting.
Does it seem that way?
Yes.
Leona often initiated conversations. Though they were trivial, to Enkrid, it felt like a spider observing its prey, never leaving it alone. A spider with that appearance is a bit of a stretch, he thought. She was undoubtedly a beauty that anyone would turn to look at.
Is it because of the ferry company, Commander? You seem indifferent to a woman's appearance.
Not necessarily.
Then are you saying I'm not your type?
There was a playful look on her face, making him wonder what she meant by that question.
It seems rare for a man to ignore a lady as beautiful as Lady Leona, don't you think?
Though he spoke indirectly, Enkrid was implying he wasn't interested. After their trivial conversation, Leona would smile modestly and sit next to the company commander.
Be careful, he has a history with women.
Then the company commander would spew nonsense. Leona would laugh at her words. Could she understand the fairy's jokes? The jokes that made Enkrid uncomfortable continuously amused Leona.
You are the wittiest fairy I've ever met.
She said.
I hear that often.
She replied. From where exactly? While preparing for another bout, Enkrid almost twisted his ankle. Keeping his senses sharp, he overheard their conversation. Their voices were loud enough to be heard even without paying close attention.
There are even rumors that we have a child together.
What?
There are people in the unit who believe that.
Wouldn't saying such things only deepen the misunderstanding? He worried, but Leona laughed it off. Whether she believed it or not was unclear.
Aren't you going to fight? Are you tired now?
Enkrid looked at those waiting for him and set aside his worries. Rumors would spread regardless. After Leona's sudden confession, worse rumors were bound to spread.
The charming squad leader.
Those guarding outside frequently referred to him that way.
The charming squad leader who broke spells. The charming squad leader who can't leave women alone.
He was getting tired of hearing it.
Am I really a charming squad leader?
He asked. Even Jackson had used the term.
Huh?
All the guards are only looking at the squad leader.
Indeed, it turned out that way somehow. For an entire day they sparred like mad. At first, the awkward atmosphere around them had completely dissipated. They all bonded through their swords and sweat. As a result, Enkrid ended up with bruises all over his body.
Does it hurt?
The one who had hit him asked. Enkrid shook his head.
No.
The strike he received a while ago was perfect. He kept replaying it in his mind. To counter an overhead strike, pretending to block from below while cutting the opponent's forearm. Instantaneous judgment, the ability to time it, and boldness. These necessary elements naturally came to mind. It was an embodiment of an experience he had never encountered before.
Ah.
Enkrid was once again filled with exhilaration. He was intoxicated by the current events. Sometimes the company commander would step in and do something resembling wrestling. Occasionally, Leona would speak to her.
I'm envious. I should have learned that too.
She said this while watching the company commander grab and hang onto someone's arm, applying pressure to their joint. Enkrid, on the other hand, was busy trying to stay upright and endure the technique.
Utilize wrestling, soldier.
The company commander would add. Whether it was because they saw Enkrid listening to Jackson's advice or out of pure goodwill, he wasn't sure. He didn't need to question it, so Enkrid maintained a listening posture.
Your left-right balance is quite off. Does anyone help you with your physical training?
It wasn't just the company commander. The border guards were the same. He heard the same things from the border guards that Auden had mentioned. The difference in left-right balance. It could be attributed to being right-handed, of course.
The first step to reaching human limits is training all your muscles. Your strength is commendable.
Torres also offered advice.
You only thought about closing the distance because it was a dagger, right? Try making it seem like you want to draw them into closer combat. What would your opponent think then? Plant a demon in their mind.
How to complicate the opponent's thoughts.
You have a bad habit. Deceiving your opponent is good, but you must not lose the basics. Where is your center of gravity?
They also pointed out mistakes he made during the sparring. Enkrid didn't know how it ended up like this, but he was completely immersed, listening to everything intently. He listened and listened with an attentive posture. It was different from sparring with his squad members. Did he seem to be enjoying it?
Will you spar with me as well?
A fencer from Pollard stepped forward, loosening his rapier from its sheath and setting it aside. Enkrid nodded reflexively. It was exactly what he wanted.
You're an interesting fellow, sparring during a mission.
I prefer to spend my time valuably.
During a guard mission, there was bloodshed over a succession issue within a large merchant group. Even in such a situation, Enkrid held and swung his sword. He had to. Others' time and Enkrid's time were different. Those with talent and those without cannot be equal. Therefore, Those who need to make up for their lack will always find time insufficient. The fencer with the rapier found this intriguing.
One doesn't improve their skills in real time.
He is a soldier with the charm of drawing people in. The relationship change between Enkrid and the border guards is particularly interesting. The initial wariness between strangers had melted away, giving way to friendliness. It was a remarkable sight to witness.
A rare talent.
However, it was not in swordsmanship. His current skill level was his limit. This was evident to the fencer, the owner of the rapier. Enkrid's talent lay elsewhere. Having encountered many talented individuals, the fencer could surmise this. If Enkrid's dream was to become a knight, he would immediately shake his head. Nevertheless, regardless of his talent,
I would still like to teach him.
his passion was endless. He didn't let any words slip by. While his talent was poor, he possessed a different kind of intense passion. It was a skill to inspire those around him with his enthusiasm. The instructors who had taught Enkrid so far felt something similar. Even knowing it was futile, they ended up trying to impart what they had to Enkrid. They taught and taught again. It was a passion and spirit as if the word give up didn't exist.
Will you spar with me as well?
That made him step forward and open his mouth.
Huh?
The colleague who came with him looked at him in surprise. He himself was surprised. After all, they were enemies. Stepping forward here might seem foolish. Moreover, it would be even more foolish if the opponent refused. The problem was that he hadn't considered any of this until he spoke up. Enkrid nodded.
Now.
His arms were bruised, and his body was soaked in sweat. He exuded heat that blew away the cold wind in the vacant lot. Steam rose from his shoulders. He must have been tired. Winning or losing wasn't important. The man simply enjoyed sparring purely.
Good.
The fencer said without realizing it. Jackson doubted the fencer's intentions. The company commander nodded with interest. All the border guards were ready to cut him down if things went south. They wouldn't stand by if something happened to Enkrid. And Enkrid,
Quick sword.
he was busy visualizing the opponent's sword in his mind. How should he react? What fighting style would give him the highest chance of winning? Could he win?
Don't overthink it.
Rem had said he had never seen a pup survive if it fought with victory and defeat in mind. Rather than doubting victory or defeat,
Have confidence. That's the first thing.
sharpen the knife of confidence. The heart of the beast instills boldness. Enkrid raised the tip of the twig, pointing it at the sky. He focused as if gripping a sword with both hands. In an instant, the surroundings changed. His concentration flared, transforming the area into the middle of a battlefield. He saw the armor covering his opponent's body. He saw the thin sword in his opponent's hand. If he couldn't dodge, he would die. Engrossed in this sudden thought, Enkrid dove into the moment. A thin branch and a person. A dangling arm, the branch almost touching the ground. It looked like a sword sharper and more pointed than any other. After that, there was nothing to think, drink, or do. Everything happened in an instant and ended in an instant. Enkrid saw the phantom of the battlefield. The moment the opponent seemed to move, he instinctively swung the branch. The branch Enkrid held sliced through the air heavily. It sliced through only air, and the tip of the opponent's branch touched his neck.
How?
He recalled the scene he had just seen. He had seen it so. It would be correct to say he was struck despite seeing it.
Everyone seems to say a word after it's over, so I will too. It was timing.
The man said. The opponent had used a quick sword, and he utilized it like a textbook for the correct sword technique. He didn't move first, he countered Enkrid's downward strike.
Not just parrying.
Enkrid's eyes fell to the opponent's feet. He saw the dirt ground softly drawing a semicircle following the opponent's boots.
Twisting his body to hide his center line.
It's basic. In some ways, it could be called a simple technique. He twisted his body to dodge and finished with a stab.
If it were the battlefield.
It would have felt similar to the first stab experience. He thought he had reached a completely different level since then. Far and high. The opponent's skill was exceptionally superior. For an ordinary person, realizing their limits would be enough to be overwhelmed with despair and frustration. He showed such a difference, with just a single strike of a stick.
You don't seem that young.
The man spoke, hinting at a question, so Enkrid answered.
30, once more.
Once more.
Nod. At Enkrid's nod, the man let out a hollow laugh. From his perspective, this guy wasn't normal. He showed the difference. He stepped out with passion, but his limits were clear, so he wanted to break his spirit to prevent wasting time. Defeat is painful for everyone, especially when facing an overwhelmingly superior opponent. What does it mean to lose? What happens to someone who faces defeat? They despair, they're frustrated, and they suffer. Some do not accept it and struggle.
Is it struggling?
It didn't seem that way.
You seem to be taking away the timing of my downward strike. How did you do it?
Instead, he was asking to be taught more. There was no sign of embarrassment. Just like when he first tempted him, he only looked at him with eyes holding a silent flame that would burn through anything.
This guy is crazy.
Even with such thoughts, the man took his stance again. Despite seeing the opponent's skills and limits, he still wanted to spar again. Naturally, Enkrid lost again. He lost 4 more times. He didn't tire and kept challenging, and the swordsman from Pollard accepted every challenge.
You are not at the level to face him yet.
Jackson offered advice instead of consolation. But Enkrid didn't particularly need consolation. Losing, experiencing defeat, he had done that countless times. He had been defeated by talents younger than himself. He was pushed back by mercenaries who picked up the sword later than he did. He had even lost to a guy who played the role of vigilante in the village. He had lost to bandits. During his mercenary days, he had been defeated by bastards who proved that personality and skill do not correlate. He had fled from beasts and monsters countless times. When a harpy's claw pierced his comrade's heart, he was busy running away. If he had hung his head in shame each time, Enkrid wouldn't be here acting as a squad leader. There was no room to be hurt by such things just.
It was fun.
It was simply enjoyable. Enkrid was honest.
Sometimes, squad leader, you seem very strange.
Enkrid really didn't want to hear such things from his own squad member. Even though Jackson was the most normal one he brought along, this guy wasn't really an ordinary soldier either. Ignoring Pollard completely when he spoke wasn't normal. Even now, Jackson was barely acknowledging Pollard. Whenever there was a chance, Pollard would sneak up and say,
You soldier bastard, I remember your face. I am the next leader of Rockfried.
and he would be completely ignored.
Hey, are you not answering? Why? Are you so scared you can't speak?
Still ignored.
You bastard, I'll make you regret it later with tears running down your face.
Even then, he was ignored. Consistent, one might say. Eventually, Pollard ended up complaining to Enkrid.
Hey, why does that guy keep ignoring me?
Treating him like he didn't exist must have driven him mad. And from Enkrid's perspective, Pollard looked like he was on the verge of tears. Enkrid felt sorry for him and offered advice.
Because you keep talking to him.
It was a wise answer to a foolish question. He ignored him because he kept talking to him. He shouldn't have started talking in the first place. Enkrid nodded to himself, acknowledging his own generosity. It was the kindest advice possible. Pollard trembled at those words.
You.
Seeing him unable to continue, Enkrid cheerfully walked past him.
Soldier, you're ruthless.
The company commander said from the side, but he couldn't have been more kind. Leona, who heard this, even spat out her tea.
I just want to say once more that I really like you.
She left with those words. No, why does this happen when I show kindness? The repeated sparring ended after a full day had passed. It was now time to wrap things up. The border guard, the company commander, and the unnamed swordsman. Enkrid had gained a lot. Everyone, including Jackson, was just in awe of his passion. But for Enkrid, it was an invaluable time.
Especially.
The opponent, swordsman, taught him what a quick sword is, how to counter it, and what an opponent can do with speed. Nothing was imprinted in his mind immediately like a flash of lightning.
That's okay.
When he hits a wall, it will be incredibly useful. The next morning dawned after washing off sweat, warming by the fireplace, and checking his armor.
Squad leader!
Kreis opened the inn door. Behind him was the bald Gilpin, and in Gilpin's hand was a friend with half his face smashed in. It seemed impossible to recognize his face after being beaten so badly.
That's him.
The company commander recognized him at a glance. The senses of a fairy seemed different indeed.
Hick.
The foolish hiccuped. Enkrid wondered how such a person could be considered the head of a merchant group and what the people under him were thinking.
Are they planning to use him as a puppet?
If so, well, if not, why would such a skilled swordsman be there? It didn't seem like he had been caught with a weakness.
Please spare me.
The captured man drooled blood-mixed saliva. Blood and saliva pooled on the floor. He must have been beaten quite severely.
This guy was rough at first, but after some conversation, his personality softened.
Christ said. Of course, the conversation Christ mentioned didn't involve using his tongue, fists, or feet. It seemed a knife was also involved. Judging by the wounds on his forearms, there were cuts too. They were roughly wrapped in old linen bandages, but the traces were clear.
I am the leader. Yes, I was blinded by Krona and caused this trouble.
The man confessed without being asked.
Hold on.
Everyone was focused on the beaten man's words, but Leona's voice caught their attention.
I need someone restrained. The person responsible is Platoon Leader Torres, right?
Yes.
There were many eyes watching. When Torres nodded, 2 border guard members put their hands under the man's armpits. They headed upstairs. Soon, Leona, Pollard, Torres, the talkative brown-haired man, the swordsman who sparred with Enkrid, and their group followed upstairs. Enkrid and the company commander also decided to join them.
I ask you two to continue guarding me.
With those words, Jackson stayed below. More precisely, he didn't seem to want to leave the spot where the Carmen Collection's stiletto was in front of him. As everyone moved, Kreis approached Enkrid, who was about to go up, and quietly asked,
What is it?
Are you asking because you don't know? Or are you asking to confirm? Let's say I'm asking because I want to receive what I'm due.
This big-eyed maniac is obsessed with Krona. It's natural to be paid for the work done, but he couldn't give the stiletto.
You take the entire guard fee for this month.
When Kreis caught the man, he noticed a slight twitch of a smile at the corner of Jackson's mouth before it stopped. Taking the Carmen Collection from Jackson's hands now would be nearly impossible with any ordinary skill, and there was no intention of doing so, nor was there any intention of shirking payment for the work done. Enkrid handed over the pouch he was supposed to receive from the guild, that is, from Kreis.
Consider it promised.
If Kreis knew the payment was the Carmen Collection, what would he do? Would he just let it go? There wasn't much to think about. He would let it go. Because it was something Jackson coveted. Kreis knew his place within the squad well. Enkrid wasn't the only one who had learned how to survive within the squad, whether it was Jackson, Rem, Ragna, or Auden. When it came to what they desired, Kreis stepped back cleanly. He wasn't foolish enough to put his hand in a dog's mouth to check if it bites when looking at a hunting dog tied to a leash.
See you later.
Enkrid gently pushed Kreis's forehead and headed upstairs. They occupied one room. In the middle, the kneeling leader of the spy unit. Torres stood next to the man with his hand on the hilt of his sword. 3 people from Pollard's side. Leona was alone. When Enkrid stood next to the company commander and Leona, the scene finally set. When Enkrid arrived, Leona began to speak.
I know he needs to be interrogated separately, but may I ask a few questions first?
The question was directed at Torres.
Go ahead.
Torres' attitude had been the same from the first day until now. He was always stern towards outsiders of the border guard. Leona didn't seem particularly bothered by it. Leona was the assassination target. She had every right to ask a few questions first, even if it wasn't a full interrogation. She was the root cause of all the problems. The succession issue in the merchant group was the starting point of everything, the man who had been beaten to a pulp. Leona knelt down to meet his eyes.
Who ordered you?
I don't know. All I know is that I was told to target the lady in the inn, using available resources.
The man spoke directly despite trembling. He seemed to sense that not speaking properly would mean the end for him.
Do you recognize anyone in this room?
The man looked around. He glanced at everyone, including Enkrid, then shook his head. They wouldn't have been stupid enough to order it directly. Usually, a few intermediaries are involved in such plots. From here, it was interrogation time. Pollard targeted Leona. If that were revealed, the issue of succession in the merchant group would be settled. That's what Enkrid anticipated.
It seems like some fools were greedy for my purse and decided to take action.
Leona began to say something unexpected.
What?
The captured leader of the spy unit tilted his head in confusion.
It wasn't me.
And the foolish Pollard showcased his wit. He hadn't even listened to what Leona said.
Who said it was?
Leona countered.
No, that's not it.
Pollard's pupils shook violently. Considering she slapped him in the face upon their first meeting, now he was acting like this. Enkrid thought he would have been extremely embarrassed if he were in Pollard's position. In the end, Pollard stammered and uttered the dumbest possible response he could with his tongue, unable to continue. Torres frowned. Everyone from Pollard's side was rather calm. The situation was unfolding oddly. They all thought Pollard would be blamed.
Bold.
The company commander whispered from behind, just loud enough for Enkrid to hear. Bold? What was it? Enkrid didn't easily understand the situation. Curious, he let his mind think it through. There must be a reason for a person to act uniquely. Of course, the squad members, including Rem, often did crazy things without reason. But Leona wasn't Rem. Enkrid reflected on the situation. The Rockfried Trading Company, Pollard, Leona, the succession issue, the attack within the Border Guard, the Border Guard members, the captured man, Aspen's spies. Reviewing what he knew, he realized something and nodded to himself. This was a part he hadn't considered because he was so engrossed in sparring and training. He understood at that moment.
In the name of Aspen, you tried to cover up the crime, didn't you?
Leona asked again.
That's enough. From here on, it seems to be our business.
Torres interrupted Leona.
Is that so? Anyway, the misunderstanding is cleared up.
Leona smiled sweetly. It was a smile that said, I'm innocent, I'm naive, I know nothing. Of course, she knew everything and was far from naive. Instead of answering, Torres grabbed the man's shoulder and said,
Let's go.
There was no farewell to Enkrid. He just pushed the man's messed up face and glared at him.
Please, please spare me.
Shut up. You're just an enemy spy.
I'll tell you everything I know. I'm not a spy. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding.
Don't worry. I'll cut your tongue last.
At Torres's words, the man's legs gave way, but he had no freedom to fall. 2 squad members on either side grabbed him under the arms, lifting him. Judging by Torres' attitude, he seemed annoyed that things weren't going as expected.
There must have been a mental battle.
He had been too obsessed with the sword to see the situation, but now he could see things clearly. Why doesn't Leona pin the crime on Pollard? What would happen if it were revealed that Pollard was behind it?
Is it only Pollard's responsibility, or does the Rockfried Company also bear some responsibility?
If the company were to be held accountable, would it benefit Leona to admit it or deny it? If the company was definitely hers, it would be better not to admit it. If she didn't need to get rid of that fool Pollard over this issue, that is. Enkrid thought Leona would sacrifice Pollard for the sake of the company's succession. If that happened, the Border Guard would use the fact that a member of the Rockfried Company ordered an assassination as leverage to demand a price. In any case, the company's act of instigation would have tarnished the city's honor. The city's honor was equivalent to the unit's honor, and they could have used this to extract a hefty price.
Did she make this decision for the sake of the company?
Did she care that much about her company?
Why, have you suddenly fallen for my beauty?
Enkrid found himself staring at her face. What kind of woman was she? Her face was much brighter than when she slapped Pollard's cheek. She exuded a natural confidence. Even while displaying such confidence, there was no flaw in her sitting posture. It was the face of a merchant who had finished calculating. It seemed she didn't need to sacrifice anything of the company. She must have had something she was relying on, and it wasn't the Border Guard standing army. She was truly a mysterious woman.
No.
Enkrid responded with what needed to be said. Regardless of his thoughts, attitude, or intentions, Enkrid's job was simply to complete the mission.
That's a shame.
Leona smiled. Did he think her beauty didn't suit a spider? That thought needed to be corrected. Looking at her now, didn't she suit it perfectly? The smile she wore now, having shed the mask of innocence, was that of a spider with its prey.
Thank you for everything.
The task was nearing its end. Leona, who was packing her things at the inn, said. Beside her, Pollard was grinning. In reality, had he won a verbal argument with Leona regarding the succession, or had he succeeded in his prepared assassination attempt? Even so, he was smiling. That smile seemed to say that he was now the owner of the company.
Hey, soldier, you'll be clinging to my coattails later.
At first, he seemed to be picking a fight with Jackson.
At some point, he started aiming his arrows at Enkrid. He repeatedly picked on Enkrid.
Should I have ignored him?
Was it a problem born out of kindness? Suddenly, such thoughts crossed his mind. Pollard's face seemed to epitomize a triumphant expression, a smile on his lips, eyes filled with confidence, even emitting excitement through his breath.
Instead of clinging to your coattails, I could just cut off your feet.
Enkrid muttered to himself, not wanting to give the other a chance to respond. Only Jackson, the company commander, and Leona, who was nearby, heard this.
If that's the case, just cut off his head, it's faster.
Jackson advised.
You're popular with men too, soldier.
The company commander teased.
I feel unnecessarily apologetic.
Leona apologized.
Huh? What did you say?
Pollard, who hadn't heard Enkrid's muttering, asked. Enkrid ignored him completely. He should have never carried any kindness from the beginning. Pollard briefly showed his temper at being ignored but soon calmed down. A plain-looking man behind him tugged at his collar. He quickly subdued his excitement. Even after that, Pollard continued to express his confidence with repeated glares.
Anyone can see that he's up to something.
It was obvious what that preparation entailed without needing to be said. There would be no more tolerated commotion within the border guard.
They'll probably try to kill us as soon as we step out.
Looking at the faces of Leona's group gathered in front of the inn, he wondered if they could indeed handle the situation. While he was lost in thought, Leona came up beside him and spoke.
It feels like I'm being escorted.
It wasn't a feeling of being escorted, but an actual part of the protection duty. Pollard stupidly revealed his intentions, but Leona was the opposite. What was she relying on? He suddenly became curious. There was no sign of worry in Leona's demeanor.
I won't forget the favor of saving my life. If I get the chances in the future, I will surely repay it.
A female guard, who barely escaped with her life from an assassin, approached from the second floor.
Yes.
Enkrid didn't pay much attention. How likely was it to meet again on this vast continent? However, the thoughts of those around him were different. 2 squads guarding the entire inn were still nearby. They provided protection as well, taking responsibility for the incident within the border guard.
Spreading love affairs with every passing woman, throwing the poison of charm at every woman he passes. Your name is the charming squad leader.
But instead of working, they were sitting and composing poems.
Why are they doing that?
The female guard, blushing, asked.
They all want to become minstrels after they retire, so they're practicing. Just leave them be.
Enkrid replied casually. The company commander had sidled up to Leona and whispered. Enkrid's keen hearing caught her words.
You should be careful. That soldier has a tendency to knock down every woman he sees.
Knock down what? Enkrid hadn't even smelled a woman's perfume recently. He had been too busy dealing with a series of chaotic events.
Aren't you going? It seems it's time for you to leave.
Enkrid politely saw off the soldiers of the 2 squads. They, apparently contemplating a future as minstrels, quickly composed and sang a song about the charming squad leader. They were crazy. With this incident, Torres's side, namely the border guard, left with a headache, while Enkrid's soldiers remained carefree. It was understandable, they were just following orders. Thinking of the border guard, Enkrid once again realized how skillful Leona was.
She's managed to put the border guard in debt with this.
She overturned the situation with just a few words. Whether the border guard would acknowledge this was unknown. She framed the assault as a city security issue. If the attack had arisen from the company's succession problems, it would be the Rockfried Company's responsibility. If it was an attack provoked by Krona, it became a matter of city security.
This is incredible.
Everyone knew it was Pollard's doing, but with the assassination target denying it, what could be done? Is this what it means to be a born merchant? Seeing the conclusion made things clear, otherwise it would have gone unnoticed. Well, Kreis stayed behind at the inn after Torres left and filled in the gaps.
In the end, the border guard will also deny it, but the situation is advantageous for them. Aren't they Aspen spy unit?
When asked why that was disadvantageous, Kreis explained.
If the blame is placed on Aspen spy, who benefits? Do you want to focus on the fact that Aspen spy targeted the company's Krona or that they tried to stir up trouble in the city? Which story carries more weight?
Kreis's point was understood. The moment Aspen's name was mentioned, it became a favorable situation for the company. Ultimately, it was thanks to the spy who glorified his homeland and died. Hearing this, Enkrid realized that Kreis was as sharp as Leona. He had always known Kreis was smart.
He seems to be on par with the heir of a large company.
It was just a passing thought. What good is being smart? Kreis's dream is to set up a salon where he can swindle noble women. Lost in these thoughts while walking, they soon reached the castle gate. The soldier on guard saw Enkrid and his group approaching and turned his body.
You're Enkrid, right?
As they approached, A swordsman from Polid's side spoke up.
I haven't heard your name. Sorry about that. I'm not in a position to reveal my name here.
Suddenly approached and staring intently, the swordsman then spoke towards the back of Enkrid.
I just want to have a few words. Put away the hostility.
On Enkrid's right, Jackson had suddenly come up close.
You're quite sensitive, hostility, you say.
Jackson replied. The same guy who ignored Polid so much was quite responsive here.
Don't worry, it's easy to cut a man's throat without hostility.
The company commander, who had arrived unnoticed, stood behind Polid's swordsman. The swordsman looked at them both once, and then neatly turned away, focusing on Enkrid.
Drop the sword.
A sudden command.
There are things that can't be achieved with passion alone.
It was something Enkrid hadn't heard in a long time. Give up. You have no talent. It's a waste of time. It's like walking a path that leads nowhere. Do you need to be hit to know it hurts? You know now that being cut by a sword is painful, don't you? As much time as you spend training, you can see how insignificant your talent is. Why can't you feel it? Not that he couldn't feel it. Yes, he knew. He had heard it countless times. Even if he didn't fall into the depths of despair and despondency from a few words, Enkrid knew it too, that he could never become a knight. Yes, there was a time when he believed that. Yet he still wielded the sword. He still didn't give up. He lived holding on to the tattered pieces of his shattered dream. He couldn't even see the shape of the wall blocking his way. Everything around him was darkness. Even in those times, he lived swinging his sword until his grip burst. Would things change now because he heard this, the heart of the beast, the sense of the blade, the focus point, the isolation technique, the basics of swordsmanship, including the correct sword technique, applications of the Valen mercenary sword technique. Today's repetition, continuous training and practice, increasing skills. A half step slower than a turtle in someone's eyes was, to Enkrid, a half step more meaningful than any moment in the past. Thus he unconsciously smiled.
Are you smiling?
The swordsman saw this and murmured.
Don't worry.
Jackson said a word. The company commander quietly watched Enkrid. The swordsman wanted an answer, and Enkrid gave him the reply he had been longing for.
Next time I might be the one to win.
Predicting a person's future is an arrogant act, Enkrid had said.
I see.
The swordsman, not forcing his thoughts on a deaf opponent, turned his body. It was a small commotion in front of the castle gate.
Thank you for all your hard work.
It was when they reached the front of the city wall. Leona turned around and spoke to Enkrid and the others, at the moment when they thought they might leave just like this. Enkrid saw the guard turning his head back and forth, looking between their group and the outside. He looked troubled. Wondering why, Enkrid noticed an armed group outside the city walls. The moment he saw it, he understood. If the opponent showed force, what should this side show? It was the card Leona believed in. They were outside the city walls.
Mathis, the guard of the Rockfried Company, has arrived here.
He was the only one who had come inside the city walls. He had a neatly trimmed mustache. His steps seemed light, and dust settled on the shoulders of his coat. Without force, you cannot establish a company's name on the continent. Unless you want to be devoured by bandits, marauders, monsters, and demons, force is essential. The man who had stepped forward was responsible for the force of the Rockfried Company. Just by showing himself, he gathered everyone's attention. Enkrid felt a strange sensation. Mathis seemed to fill his entire view. He saw nothing else. His presence was extraordinary. He drew everyone's gaze with his mere presence.
You have interesting companions with you.
He said this and then knelt on one knee towards Leona.
The guard has arrived. Company leader.
He spoke to Leona. Only then could Enkrid shift his gaze behind him, the Rockfried Company's guard. Over 30 armed soldiers were stationed outside the city gate.